Beegan. I'm the coordinator of the Turn Off the Red Light campaign for the Men's Development Network here in Waterford City. First of all, I'd like to say thanks to everybody for taking time out of this lovely weather to come and watch the film and documentary Price of Sex, investigative documentary into trafficking and prostitution. Afterwards, just to give you a brief rundown on the programme, we might have a quick toilet coffee break, and we will be then joined on a panel to discuss prostitution and sex trafficking in the Irish context. We'll be joined by Rachel Moran, author of Paid for My Journey Through Prostitution, and her colleague Justine Reilly. Both are from Space International. Space stands for Survivors of Prostitution Abuse, Called Enlightenment. They will give their experiences of being former prostitutes in Ireland. They'll also be joined on the panel by Diane, who is here from the Immigrant Council of Ireland, who supports women who have been trafficked into Ireland also, and Alan O'Neill from the Men's Development Network. So I'll just pass you over to Alan.
Thank you very much. Very much. I just want to share that with Rebecca. It's brilliant that you all came in today. It's such a beautiful day. We should really be on Tremor Strand now, but this is a really important issue that we're working on here and we're presenting to you today. It's difficult. It's a difficult issue. This will be a challenging documentary that you'll be watching, but very, very informative, and I think it'll bring the core of the issue that we're addressing right into focus, and you'll absolutely get a sense of how horrific sex trafficking and prostitution is across the world and in Ireland. It's key for us, the Men's Development Network, as you see from various banners around here, we work a lot on trying to end men's violence against women. So we have our MEND programme, Men Ending Domestic Violence. We're the national promoters of the White Ribbon campaign, and we're one of 68 organisations in Ireland that have been drawn in by the Immigrant Council and by Ruhama to promote the Turn Off the Red Light campaign and to try and get the law in Ireland changed in relation to prostitution. We knew that there was a difficulty with prostitution, that it was also a major issue for men to address. So, as a men's organisation, and we think a responsible one, we try and pick up what's going on for men and women in Ireland, and where do men need to take responsibility for what we're doing wrong, and also for where we're abusing women in whatever way that may be. And prostitution is one of a huge area where men are abused. Some men are abusing women. One in 15 men buy sex in Ireland, which means that 14 out of 15 men don't buy sex and don't abuse women in that way. The really important thing that we found in all our campaigns, and particularly in this one, is that those 14 out of 15 men, of whom the men here, I presume, are part of that group, it's really key that we raise our awareness about these issues and that we understand what a small number of our brothers are doing, and we need to change that. At the moment, there's an Oireachtas Justice Committee that has prepared recommendations following on various representations made to the Minister of Justice in relation to changing the law. Alan Shatter, the Minister of Justice, is considering that at the moment, and so we need to keep him aware of that. It's really important that he changes this law. There's also a motion in front of Waterford City Council this evening that we call on the City Council to support the change of the law. So we look forward to this programme we're presenting to you today, informing the Council, some of whom are here supporting this. Thanks very much. Okay, folks, welcome back. Each of the panelists here is just going to talk about introduce themselves and talk about their work first, and then we'll take questions.
Hi everyone, my name is Diane and I work with the Immigrant Council of Ireland. I'm the anti-trafficking officer there. And just to touch on the film, I know it's very heavy and it's very difficult. I've seen it several times now, and I tell you, it doesn't get any easier to watch it any time. And the reality of it is that this is not just something that's happening in Dubai or Turkey, it's happening here in Ireland. As I said, I work with the Immigrant Council, and we're an independent legal centre and NGO, and we work with vulnerable migrants in Ireland. In 2006, we started to notice some cases of human trafficking, and of course our interest was sparked by the extreme vulnerability of the people involved in these cases, but also the really legal complexity of them. So we wanted to find out more about the area of human trafficking in Ireland. I think sometimes because we don't see it happening, we often think that it's not happening here. And people are quite shocked a lot of the time to find out that we do have a massive sex industry where young girls are exploited on a daily basis. As I said, we wanted to find out more about sex trafficking into Ireland, so we conducted research which was published in 2009. And it was considered groundbreaking by many international experts because it looked at human trafficking in the very context of which it occurs, which is the Irish sex industry. And it told us a lot about the Irish sex industry. And what we found out is that girls, as we saw in the film, very similar, are recruited through deception, force, coercion. They are brought to Ireland and they end up in the Irish indoor sex industry, where there are about 1,000 women for sale every single day. 800 of those are advertised online. And what our research told us is that 98% of these women in prostitution are migrant women. A lot of them coming from very poor backgrounds, where they've had no education, no real opportunities, no chances. And they end up in the indoor Irish sex industry, and similar to the girls in the film, they are sold again and again and again, and they have to answer their phones whenever they ring, they don't get time off. And they're mostly for sale in privately rented apartments. And when we talk about the indoor sex industry, it happens in privately rented places, hotel rooms, and girls can even be delivered to people's homes. What the research told us was that because modern technology has made it so easy now, the industry is really accessible. You can order a girl on your phone, you can just do it online, and it's really quick and really accessible. Also, what the research did was highlighted, as the photojournalist in this film tried to do, is who are the people who are fueling this industry, who are those who are buying these vulnerable women. And the research in the Irish context showed us that these are predominantly middle-aged men, highly educated, successful professionals, often in a relationship or married. We actually conducted more research just this year, and the preliminary findings have showed us very similar results. And in fact, 1 in 4 of those who purchase sex admit that they have come in contact with a woman in prostitution who they believed was exploited or trafficked. So I think that shows that it's, it's there and it's happening. And as a result, the Turn Off the Red Light campaign came to be. In 2009 it was formed by, I think there was about maybe 20 organisations at the start. The campaign now represents 68 organisations, all different organisations, unions, medical organisations, youth organisations, and the Immigrant Council and the Men's Development Network are 2 of those. And what the campaigners are looking to do in order to rectify this problem is we're looking to what's referred to as the Swedish model. And it has a twofold approach. So it decriminalises the women in recognition of the subordinate life status and limited life choices they've had, and it criminalises those who purchase sex because it recognises that they're the ones who have the real choice in the situation, and that they're making an unacceptable choice when they're choosing to purchase these vulnerable women. So, as Alan mentioned earlier, we're now at a crucial stage in the campaign, and the Justice Committee recommended the criminalising the buyer of sex just very recently, and hopefully the Minister will conclude his deliberations on making some sort of change to the legislation, which we have at the moment, is completely insufficient. We work with the 1993 Sexual Offences Act, which makes it illegal to solicit sex in public. So we've already outlawed any visible manifestation of prostitution. By introducing that law, we said we don't see it as desirable, we don't want it on our streets. But as a result of that, plus globalization, the use of technology, the industry actually moved indoors, and it's a massive indoor sex industry, and it's completely unregulated, and it's a haven for pimps and traffickers. So unless we do something about it now, the industry will continue to grow and flourish, and we'll be allowing everything that you saw in the film to happen, except it's happening here on your doorstep. And it really is in every tiny town and village in Ireland. If you don't believe me, you can go online and find it yourself. It's there, it's happening on everybody's road. And we really need to say to our legislators now that we don't find it acceptable to not have the adequate legislation in place to deal with this and to do something about it. So maybe I'll say a few words at the end about what people can do when they leave here. But I'll pass on to Rachel and Justine now to talk about their experiences.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming along and listening to us. It's especially encouraging to see men here. I only said this last week in Limerick that we really, really need more men on board, and particularly, the Men's Development Network, the actual, organised groups of men coming together to tackle this issue. Because let's be straight here. This issue, you could look at it on two different sides at one time. People say it's a women's issue. Certainly a women's issue when it comes to who's being damaged here. But it is very much a men's issue, because as we all know, it's the men who buy sex who are fueling the demand. And that's not to say, of course, that every man is culpable in that, because thanks be to God, only a minority of men do purchase sex. But of the people who do buy sex, I can absolutely assure you, in my 7 years and in Justine's 20, in prostitution in Ireland, we never had one woman on the other end of the phone. We never had one woman coming into any of the brothels or down the street corners. Just didn't happen. What you will hear in this debate is the nonsense that there are a significant proportion of men and transgender people selling sex. For the start, that's not true. There's a tiny minority of men and transgender people selling sex. And what I think is very important is what you need to look at that situation, and the first question you ought to be asking yourself is, who's buying them? Because it's not women. It's not women going into brothels paying men for sex, that's for sure. And as for transgender people, they're so rare, I've never met one myself. I don't know if you did, Justine. You did? I suppose that's the first thing I'd like to say, that it's very encouraging to see, more and more men starting to speak out and to get organised and come on board with this campaign. What you will hear in relation to the Turn Off the Red Light campaign from the pro-prostitution lobby, there's certain lies, about a half a dozen of them, that are circulating all the time. They never vary. And some of them, they promote this idea of the happy hooker, well-heeled, well-educated woman who she's doing this to fund her way through her PhD. Women like that are so rare in prostitution. Again, they are so rare that I only ever heard of them some 10 odd years ago when Belle de Jour came out with her book. That was the first I heard of women like that. It's this idea, a lot of these myths that you hear, and I think this is a very important thing to concentrate on. I have yet to hear a myth that's been repeated by the pro-prostitution lobby that serves any other function than to normalise and sanitise prostitution. You will always find that. Anything that they say, women are empowered, it's sexually liberating. That is so far from the truth that it would be amusing, except for the horrible insult that it is. There is absolutely nothing on this earth less sexually liberal than sitting in a room and having your body used by any random passing stranger who can afford to come through the door and use you, and I'm going to be frank here, like some kind of a living, breathing masturbation device. Because that's what happens in prostitution, whether a woman is trafficked in that very narrow definition of the word that we use here culturally in Ireland, whether she's somebody who's been literally tricked, not just coerced by life circumstances, but 100% tricked, told everybody lies. So you have, a woman on that end of the spectrum. Then you'll have women like myself and Justine who were coerced through life experience, through previous experiences of abuse in our lives. And like in my case, I was homeless and impoverished, so that was my route in. That's what I call the traditional route. I met a lot of women in prostitution who went into prostitution because they had been sexually abused, in some cases when they were prepubescent children, some of them since they were young teenagers. And as I've said in my book, I had one friend of mine say, sure, I may as well have been charging for it as having been a stepfather, take it for free, And you can look at women in these situations, whether they're on the street corner or at the high end of the spectrum, no matter where they're working. And you can say to yourself, well, that girl is not chained to the bed. Nobody's forcing her to be there. She chose it. And you can explain it away that way in your head if you want to. But I'll tell you what we didn't choose. We didn't choose the life experiences that led us onto those street corners or into those brothels. I certainly didn't choose to be homeless at 14 years of age, and can't imagine anybody who would. So I'd like people to think a bit about that, about the concept of choice and consent, because the reality is a person is not in a position to make a free choice if the only couple of options that they have in front of them are resting on the choices of others that were made before them. That's not free choice. That is not consent. In my case, anyway, I left home just a matter of weeks after my 14th birthday, hot on the heels of parental suicide, and found myself living in a hostel with about 10 other young girls around my own age. They were all from all manner of dysfunctional backgrounds, addiction, sexual abuse, the whole spectrum, that you'd expect. And the really disturbing thing for me to look back on now is how I started working in prostitution in the summer of '91, and how in the couple of years after that, up until the '93 legislation that Diane just mentioned, how many of those girls came out onto the streets after me, They all just started popping up every few months, another one of the girls from the hostels be out in the street. That's not a coincidence. If you take, let's say, a classroom, any classroom in Ireland grade in a secondary school, where you've got young girls around that age group, 14 to 16. Let's say it's a standard sized classroom, 30 or 35 girls. Now, wouldn't you say that there was something very strange, very wrong, and something that needed looking into if you had more than half them girls pop up in the red light zones? You'd have to ask yourself what's going on there. Well, that's exactly what happened with the community, if you like, of young girls that were in residential care in the early 90s. They were all popping up on the street corners, not because they wanted to be there, but because they had no genuine, viable choice. And that's something I'd really like people to think about, is that there is a difference between having a choice and having a viable choice. There's a huge difference. For my own sake, I'm very, very glad I wrote the book. I would never regret it, as having, I've had a lot of experiences the last couple of months since it went out, most of them positive, some of them negative. The ones that were negative, I have to say, were extremely negative, viciously negative. I had a gang rape threat in the street about a month ago by 5 young men. I had an older male family member viciously assault me and, knock me around the place. I wasn't in a position to defend myself because I was getting on an airplane to Norway 2 days later and I needed my face intact. you know, so some of the things that have happened, I had my home had to be under surveillance Gardaí for about 10 days just after the book came out because of direct threats to my front door. These are the type of things that happen when women speak out against the sex trade. Certain people are absolutely enraged, you know, and I suppose because of our status in life as unworthy piece of dirt and sluts and all of this, maybe some people are especially affronted, you know, that we've got the nerve. Well, I'm very glad we have the nerve anyway, and every last negative thing that has happened would be absolutely so worth it the day we get this legislation. But to counterbalance all that, what has been a wonderful thing, and I know Justine will agree with me, for every one nasty incident, we've had dozens and dozens of positive responses, usually from total strangers, very often from men. The whole process of putting Space International together, which is the group that we're involved with now, Justine is co-founder along with myself. The whole process of putting that group together and, you know, publishing the book and doing all these public speaking engagements, it's been very freeing. And in the run-up to all this, men just started to come out of the woodwork, which was amazing. Because we don't have two pennies to rub together, everything we do is done by volunteers. Our IT guy is a man. The chap who does all our videography, another man. The person I was introduced to when I was first wanting to get in touch with an editor to help me put down the book because I'd ridiculously overwritten it. I'd written like 220,000 words. You know, he put me in touch with the right people in the publishing world, another man. So, you know, I have found that very healing in itself. And I really do believe, though, I mean, you all watch the film, and I think there's something in that, to me, it outrages me so deeply. When I watch the likes of that film, and we only caught the last half because we missed the early train, but that's a whole other issue. Yeah, when I watch things like that, I know, to be quite frank, that I would be capable of more. That's how much rage it brings up in me. But, sorry? Oh yeah, okay. We're running over. We're running over. Sorry about that.
I know the feeling. Absolutely. Just to say that Rachel will be launching her book after this session with the panel, so you'll have an opportunity to say some more about it.
Okay.
I love it.
My name is Justine Reilly, and as Rachel said, I'm a founder member of a group called Space International, and we're linked in with Canada, USA, UK. Basically what SPACE stands for, it's Survivors of Prostitution Abuse Calling for Enlightenment. People always, you know, people talk about prostitution and they always have this view that it's women like Rachel that end up in prostitution with parents in mental illness and this, that and the other. I had none of that. I came from the country, normal family. I came to Dublin, as green as the grass is, and I met somebody, fell in love, and we were struggling trying to pay rent and stuff like that, so my partner suggested I got into this escorting, which I thought was going for dinner. And, you know, no sex involved. But anyway, my first day, my partner rang up an ad in the back in Dublin, gave my details, my descriptions, and the first day I went to a place in Christchurch. So I was waiting there to be taken out to this big posh restaurant with some old geezer. This guy comes to the door, and I was brought down to a room. So I kind of straight away said, oh, no. I said, Jesus, no, I can't do this. And she called her boyfriend, who was also a pip, and he got on the phone and he started saying, excuse me, language, a little cunt joke, I'll go down there and I'll smash her face in. So it was a skinny whippet of a thing anyway, it wouldn't have taken much. But I was brought down into the room. The man had performed oral sex on the client, because I didn't even have to put a condom on the client in the first place. I lay down, basically like a mannequin. I lay there and he climbed on top of me and he did what he did. I did 10 men my first day. And 20 years later, I'm only out for 3 years. I couldn't escape it. Now, the reason for telling you that is that you're in Waterford, and you probably all have come from nice families, and you know you think your daughters are safe. They're not, because it's by association that you can get involved in prostitution. And once you get into it, prostitution to me is like when you lose your virginity. Once that happens, something breaks inside you that you will never get back. Even as a survivor, you will never get back. It'll always be there. I had a stupid question asked one time. This woman, after listening to us all talking, I'm not going to say that. And she said, well, tell me what prostitution is. Explain it, like, what is it? And the only explanation that I came away from as a prostitute was I felt like a public toilet. Men came in, they emptied themselves into me, and they left. They didn't look at me, and I didn't look at them. I wouldn't recognise them in the street half the time I seen them, you know. And now with the internet, with the introduction of the internet, you know, women are being trafficked. 95% of the women that are advertised for sex for sale in this country are foreign women, you know. So basically we are calling for the Nordic law. If we decrease demand, you can guarantee we will decrease prostitution in Ireland.
Are there any questions for our panel? Following that.
Hi.
Did you say who you are?
Frank Keating. I'm a lecturer in WIT, and I have daughters, I have granddaughters, I have foster daughters. And I've listened to a programme on national radio within the last 3 weeks where they interviewed a young man. I believe he was from Britain. There was a phone-in, and he was advocating prostitution for those with physical disabilities. He had a physical disability. This was on national radio, and it was seen as progressive, as enlightening, and in fact it was suggested that it should be made available on prescription. Would you comment on that?
Well, that's kind of what you have to take the comedic value out of that one. Justine, I didn't actually get to listen to the radio show that day with Justine.
Oh, I had the pleasure of telling them what I thought about that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so what's next? Did we organise a load of buses down to John O'Connell's full of prostitutes? You know, and who chooses? Whose daughter, out of all of you, whose daughter will be picked to get onto this bus? You know?
Not mine.
So think about that. People need to think about that. You know, and they're thinking about, oh, there's freedom, this, that. They need to think about, do they want their daughter on that bus? Do they want their daughter to go down there and give some man in a wheelchair a blowjob? You know?
It also perpetuates the myth, doesn't it, that people with disabilities can't actually find someone to have a loving, committed relationship with.
Which is, it was actually the disability people, remember they said, not in our name.
Yeah, that was in Norway, the largest group of group that said they were an advocate for people with disabilities. They made a very strong statement to the contrary of what that disabled man had to say. You know, at the bottom of it all, what you're talking about there is one marginalised group being given the green light to go ahead and abuse another marginalised group. It's as simple as that.
And it's like as if one marginalised group then has rights over someone's human rights have been put before somebody else. Thanks, Frank. Any other questions?
Yeah, Jim Goddard is my name. When you say 95% of prostitutes here are foreign nationals, does that mean that they're controlled by foreign nationals here as well? And if so, like, what kind of controls are here in regards to foreign people coming in here with criminal records, for instance?
Yeah, when the Gardaí presented their evidence to the committee February gone, they told the government that prostitution is highly, you know, it's organised. There are very, very few women who you could classify as independent escorts in prostitution. The vast majority of these women, like Justine said, 95% are from impoverished countries in Eastern Europe, like Romania, Bulgaria, you know, different countries, African nations, South American nations, and they are controlled over here by international pimping gangs. And you know, I spoke to Sarah Benson, the CWO of Ruhama, and she told me about some of her work with these women. Even though a lot of them knew exactly that they were going into the sex trade over here, so they don't fit that very tight, narrow definition of trafficking that I just mentioned. They're coming over here with no English, okay? We're being expected to believe that they found a way to get themselves onto a flight to find themselves a brothel on the far other side of the world. And after coming out of this village, and you don't have, you know, can't string a sentence together. And then, you know, they're told all sorts of lies to get them here. Oh, you'll only be doing maybe, you know, 2 men in an evening and a few nights a week. You can go out and do your foreign language course, you can do your computer course. Now, next thing, 6, 7 years go by, they're actually seeing 50 men a week and they never seen the inside of the college. You know, so it's actually aggravating to me that the definition of trafficking is so tight and so narrow, because it really needs to be broadened back out.
Also, it's a bit. Also, it's a business. When a Russian pimp comes into Dublin, I've seen this myself. When a Russian pimp comes into, say, Dublin, right, and he'll contact the local brothel or a few of the brothels, and he'll say, "I have my friend. She's looking for a job. Blah blah blah. Her English is not good." He'll make a deal with the pimp, you know, to get her the job. So then you have the pimp dealing with the foreign pimp who's got the other, and then of course the money is, they're thinking, Jesus, this is great money altogether. So then he decides to go over and get a couple of her cousins or whatever out of the village and bring them over, and this is the way it, but it's all done, this is the frightening thing about it, people don't realise it, as you've seen from the film, the horror, but it's not actually done like that. The way it's done is the most nicest, gentlest way, in a way where they're like, oh no, we'll get a job and everything else, and it'll be grand, and we'll get you over there, and then just do this for a while, and we can, you know, it's sick. It's a sick thing.
Usually a lot of the girls that we work with, they've been recruited in their country of origin by someone that they trust, and that's the key thing, you know. It's a boyfriend, it's a friend, it's a cousin, it's a family friend, it's a family member. It's that trust that's been built up. It's like a grooming process, and then of course that trust has been so brutally broken down. It's very difficult for them to ever trust anyone again. The definition that we use, and we have trafficking legislation, it's our 2008 legislation, and we use the Palermo Protocol definition of human trafficking, but it's not working, because we're still having trafficking offences. 134 people in the last 3 years have been trafficked into Ireland. That's just the touch of the iceberg. They're just the official department numbers, those who've been identified by services. We know that it's much, much bigger than that. And the Garda were saying it, Paul McGuire, who did an investigative piece for RTE last year, some of you might have seen it, showed it as well. It's just the tip of the iceberg. The legislation that we have isn't working. It's not protecting people, because there is that massive grey area. So when people think of trafficking, a lot of the time they think of a girl being kidnapped and locked in the back of a blacked out van and literally chained to a wall in a room. And while I'm sure that does happen, a lot of the time it's a lot more black and white than that. You know, they are using deception and they're lying to her in order to achieve her consent. You know, so and that, as Rachel said, that's not true consent. You know, and so what happens then is, you know, the industry continues. And if we have a sex industry, we have a trafficking industry, and they continue to grow and flourish because, you know, prevention is the key thing.
40 years ago,
Could you say your name?
Sorry, Claire Connon.
Okay.
40 years ago, I joined a society in Waterford here, and we went on the quay here to stop prostitution. We were all very young girls to try and stop them, and they only laughed at us, and you know, took no notice whatsoever. And a few of the guards from around Waterford at the time came over to us one night. It was raining, and they said, "Look, girls, would you just go home? You're only wasting your time and you're getting wet." So I'm wondering, 40 years later, what do you do? I would have loved to have helped those girls then. So what do you do now, like?
Well, to be honest with you, if anybody had come down to the street to me with the same good intentions, they would have given me the greatest laugh I've had in a long time. So I can understand why they were laughing, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you have to, and this we've campaigned very strongly for exit strategies for women to be included in the legislation, and we're delighted that the government has taken that on board and that they've recommended exit strategies. And they would take all sorts of different forms depending on a woman's situation. But remembering back to myself in the early teens, what I would have needed definitely I would have needed a training program. That would have been the most important thing. But you can't go down to the street or the Bramble or any place else and try and talk a woman out of prostitution if you're not offering a viable alternative. So that's what you need to do. You need to get in there and say, you know, here you can do this, A, B, C. Here are another range of options for you. And I can absolutely guarantee you that the majority of women in prostitution will take their hand off those opportunities.
You see, a lot of them in that situation as well. Like in my situation, I wasn't chained to a bed, but I had a partner there. And the mood swings and the fights and the arguments because, you know, money was short or whatever else. So to have, even like what Muhammad do, a group that will look at every perspective of that prostitute's life. What has brought her there? What is keeping her there? And then find solution. And if it means getting her into a safe house or getting her somewhere away from that partner, I can tell you, if somebody that said to me, look, you don't have to live with your partner. We'll get you a little room somewhere, we'll get you on your feet. I'd be gone. You know.
Is there a bit that where you're together, that the laughing bit from Do Good or Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to say in front of your colleagues, oh, I'll go for this.
No, because nobody ever offered me an alternative. And I tell you, one woman did come down to the corner one night and started lambasting us and screaming and shouting and carrying on, telling us to move on and get away from her home, because we were only yards away from her home. So, you know, she gave us a great laugh that night, you know, she really did. And she came back a few times after, actually, and sure, we were laughing the whole way. And it wasn't until eventually she started getting her nerves and told her where to go, you know. But a part of it, the reason for humour is that it's like you're in two different worlds. You know, you can't have somebody coming from the normal world into prostitution telling you need to get out of it. You know, it's
and it's a survival technique that we've used, you know, to laugh at the most horrific thing. You know, is our only way of dealing with it, because we can't cry, because if we cry we're weak and we can't allow, you know. You know, you ever hear somebody that's so upset and they say, if I start crying now I'll never stop. And that's exactly the way we feel. So what we would do use the other ability within us to express or get release it, that would be laughter.
Thanks, Kate.
Catherine Dunn, ACT to prevent trafficking. I'm just asking myself the question, can I be hopeful about the process of consultation and the recommendation at the moment? And I said to myself, we have legislation at the moment, and yet nobody has been convicted. Now, if this legislation goes through, will they apply it? Will there be really any improvement? And from the film there, we were very clearly told the need for a multidisciplinary approach. And really, I ask myself, unless we really tackle that, are we really going to make any impression on the road out of this situation, even in Ireland?
Ultimately, the problems with the trafficking legislation are that it relies on several things. It relies on the woman's cooperation in prosecuting the trafficker in order to have a case of, in order for her to be recognised as a victim of trafficking, she has to comply with the Garda investigation in trying to criminalise the trafficker. This is obviously very difficult for these women who've already been through a hugely traumatic experience, and often they don't, or they can't go through with that. Also, it requires cooperation of other states, maybe the country of origin or a transit country where the girls come from. And that's also very difficult in progressing an investigation where, as you saw in that film, the police force lack resources, where they're just corrupt. So the issues with the trafficking legislation are extremely difficult. But what this legislation does is it acts in a preventative way. Ultimately, you know, men don't want to be criminalised for purchasing sex. They don't want to get a letter in the door that their wife is going to pick up saying that they were trying to buy sex from a prostitute and that they're up in court next week, or that they have a fine. It acts in a preventative way. And that's the success for Sweden, and they've seen that over 10 years later that it's a preventative measure. You know, it stops men doing it, and that's ultimately what we want. Of course, there has to be more resources for the guards to implement the legislation, and also exit strategies for women. What we've seen from the Nordic countries, and it works so well in Sweden, that the numbers of prostitution and trafficking drop significantly, and the neighbouring countries took on similar legislation as a result. You know, we've seen that it works, it's proven its effectiveness, and that's why we're looking for this legislation. And of course, you know, there are other elements around enforcement, but it changes attitudes, and that's the key thing. It changes behaviours. So their younger generations are now saying, you know, no, I would never purchase another human being, it's unacceptable. You know, because that's what the law has done, and it set a standard. Like, we often compare it to the smoking ban here, you know, where years ago you would light up a cigarette in here or in the cinema or in a restaurant. You just wouldn't even think about doing it now, because the law said that we don't accept this as a state, as a country. This is not what we do. And that's what it's declarative and it's preventative. And that's why we believe, and we've seen it, that it can work.
Thanks, Dan. We've how many questions left? 3. We've run right over time.
Go on. Keep going.
Yeah, you okay? Keep going? Yeah. Okay. Sean was next, and then Sam, and then our friend back.
John here in Waterford City Council on Sinn Féin. I have to commend the two of you. Fair play, but the first thing you have to do is stand up. You've done that, and now they have to knock you down. That's the hard thing for them to do.
Very hard.
But the most important thing we found last year in the city here, there was a very big gang dealing in heroin who were using massive violence against people and burning people out of their homes. And it was being swept under the carpet as we found it. And we said if we put the spotlight on it, but it's amazing the consequences that flow from just standing up. Because when the consequences came, we had big rows on the council because they said there was no drugs in Waterford, and now there's 90 on the methadone programme because we fought for the different issues that the services for the people who needed it. But because of that, then they brought out an anti-intimidation device recently, and it's very, very effective. I'm forever bringing people up to the barracks to. It's one inspector set aside, which could be in your case for trafficking or for prostitution, or for, and it's one case set aside to deal solely with drugs-based intimidation. And it's not so much the dealers, they now obviously never come to us, but it's the sisters and brothers of the victims that come and see us. And we can bring them in. It's about gathering the intelligence that they don't have a safe place to work. And it just goes to show you what we didn't know about it when we kicked off the campaign, and the consequences that did follow. Was the consequences we discovered there was an Albanian team in here in Waterford, and they were rotating, putting in a fellow with a phone and moving out. And it's obviously the exact same thing. So unless you put the spotlight in it, and you did, and 100% it takes a lot of courage to do it. But unless you did, and same, we'll carry on that fight now. I have it in my head to go and see the super about what we can do about it. But the most important thing is once you take the lid off, and people don't like seeing the warts that they see in Ireland, they don't like seeing it, they don't like discussing it, but once it's out in the open, they have to do something about it. So fair play to you on that.
First of all, I'd like to say I've read Rachel's book and I'd highly recommend it. My name is Samantha. And also, I want to know what can we do now? What can we do to help you? Like, as I said, I'm on social media and I have a lot of followers on Twitter. I mean, I would certainly spread the word that way. But I mean, I did get it. I retweeted a few immigrant council ones recently with Irish Biz Party, and I did get a bit of hassle from certain individuals. But I just blocked them now. But I'm very happy to support you, and I'd just like to know how we, there's about 50 people here, and how can we help you moving forward?
Yeah, sure. So, the Turn Off the Red Light campaign, as I said, 68 organisations, but it makes up, a huge amount of individuals who support the campaign as well. And it's a very active campaign. What we're asking people to do who support us and follow us is to contact their local representatives. As I said, the Justice Committee have made recommendations. Now is crunch time. The Minister is going to be reviewing this in the next few months. We need to put that pressure on. We need all of our political representatives to say, we want this legislation changed. And if you go to the turnofftheredlight.ie /action. So turnofftheredlight.ie, the action page of it, you can go there and you can take your local TDs and senators, and it takes less than 2 minutes, and you can send the emails already written there and you can send it into them. And we really need lots and lots of emails to be going in. It's extremely effective when your representatives are getting in lots of emails, and we've gotten lots of responses as well, and lots of supporters have from their TDs. It's really important to tell them now, that you want this change in legislation. So if you do anything today or for the rest of the week, please do go to the website and send in those emails. And also, if you have particular contacts with your local representatives, talk to them, talk to people. It's one of the most important things you can do, and tell them as well to lobby locally to their politicians, or write a letter the way any of us could just pick up our pen and write a letter. But as I said, it might be easier to do it through the website. But that really is really important now to do that. And of course, to spread the word in any way you can via social media or talking about it. You know now what you know today, and hopefully you know more than you came in with. So it's really important to share that with somebody else when you leave.
Also, when you see men's wealth network leaflets out there, you pick those up on your way out. You see the website address on it, and whatever we're doing in relation to this campaign will be on that from time to time. So just keep checking in there. And if you also see some of us are wearing these, if you want to give us your own email address or contact details, and we link you into whatever's happening with Turn Off the Red Light as well.
Can I just say as well, it's taken a hell of a lot of courage to sit up there, and I really applaud you.
People have this perception of women going into prostitution to feed their drug habit. Now that does happen, and I've seen that. But what I've seen far, far more commonly is women going into prostitution and developing a drug problem while they're in there. And that's the other side of it that people don't talk about it because they don't see it. But there's no way you can't be meant to women I've seen who developed a drug problem as a result of the work. Having to block out what it was that they were doing. And drugs would be specific, like you'd have more heroin among the street girls, you'd have more cocaine among the escort girls. And I noticed that because I worked at the full range of the spectrum. And I'd done the full spectrum of the drugs as well, but I was at it aware. But yeah, that was very noticeable to me, and I'd like more people to be aware of that.
Okay, folks, thanks very much. Rachel's going to launch her book out in the lobby now, so I hope you join us. And before that, we say thanks to our brilliant panelists. And just to say, the Book Centre has asked me to tell you that you can buy the book as well, which is really important. So you can go away with a copy of the book from the launch. Thank you.
Okay. Men who use prostitutes strongly argue against the immorality of their exploitative behaviour, and some will try to create distinctions between prostituted women in order to do that. Social scientists and many human rights groups accept these distinctions as if they were fact. These academics and human rights groups create a divide in their minds between those women who have been trafficked, i.e. sold into sexual slavery by someone else, and those who have sold themselves into sexual slavery because of a lack of viable choice. In a moral sense, there is no distinction, and yes, this is a moral issue, as human rights issues always are. I think that kind of gives you the idea. What I've done with the book is I've alternated my own personal memoir together with the politics of the issue, because it's a deeply political issue, and I didn't feel that people were focusing on the politics of it nearly enough. So that's probably the quickest brief I've done since this whole thing began. But thanks anyway, the whole lot is
That's great. Yeah.
I just say that Rachel has been very brief, but I'm in the middle of reading the book myself at the moment, and it's an absolutely brilliant book. If you really want to know, I mean, I just feel myself filling up at the effect of it on me reading it. If you really want to know what the depth, and I used the word savagery already, and it is just an absolutely savage situation for any woman to be in. If you really want to know what that's really, really like, you should read this book. If anyone ever says to you that this is that prostitution is okay, just get them to read this book. It's absolutely clear that it is 110% not okay. And I was listening to Alice Walker talking on television last night, and she's an African-American author, and she's written books that have challenged the situation. She wrote The Colour Purple, many of you may know that, and that absolutely challenged the situation that African Americans were coming from, and how they needed to examine their own lives. They couldn't blame it all on racism. She wasn't denying the existence of racism or its terrible effects, but she's saying we've got things that we have to look at in ourselves as well. But we as a society, and as particularly as men in this society, have to look at ourselves in relation to this issue. And as far as I'm concerned, Rachel is the Alice Walker of Ireland today. So congratulations.
I got so far because I love Alice Walker. Very much.
So I recommend you to buy this book, buy loads of copies of it, pass it around, give it to people. It's the information that people need to have. Rachel.